Bread in the medieval world was not merely a daily staple. It was a nutrient-dense superfood created through a harmony of natural processes, traditional craftsmanship, and ecological purity that modern industrial bread cannot even begin to replicate. And to understand why medieval bread strengthened the human body while modern bread so often harms it, we must step deep into the everyday life of pre-industrial Europe, where grains were alive, soil was fertile, ecosystems were intact, and the entire food chain operated under the laws of nature rather than the demands of factories, mass production, and chemical engineering. The first fundamental difference lies in the grains themselves. Because medieval farmers grew ancient varieties like einkorn, emmer, spelt, rye, and barley, each with unique nutrient profiles, rich in minerals, antioxidants, and proteins, while today's wheat has been aggressively modified and selectively bred for yield, softness, and baking performance rather than nutrition, resulting in grains with extremely high gluten content, depleted micronutrients, and a biological structure the human digestive system was never meant to handle in such concentrated, refined form. And even the soil from which modern grains grow is no longer the mineral-rich environment of the past. Medieval soils were teeming with natural microbes, organic matter, and balanced minerals because chemical fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, and monocrop agriculture did not yet exist, meaning every grain absorbed a full spectrum of earth-borne nutrients that modern industrial farming strips away. But beyond the grains themselves, the stone milling process of medieval Europe played a crucial role in preserving the nutritional integrity of bread, because traditional stone grindstones crushed whole grains slowly, preserving the bran and germ where the essential vitamins, oils, enzymes, and minerals reside, while modern roller mills, an invention of the Industrial Revolution, generate high heat, separate the grain into sterile components, remove bran and germ to prolong shelf life, destroy enzymes, reduce fiber, and bleach the flour into a nutrient-dead powder designed for softness and commercial appeal rather than human health. Stone-ground flour had a short shelf life because of its natural oils, but that was exactly what made it healthy, alive, and bioavailable, whereas modern refined flour is a long-lasting product, precisely because almost everything beneficial has been removed from it. Yet even this is only half the story. For the fermentation process is where medieval bread transforms from a basic food into a living superfood. Since medieval bakers relied exclusively on wild sourdough starters, complex ecosystems containing dozens of strains of lactic acid bacteria and wild yeasts that slowly fermented dough for many hours, sometimes overnight or even for days, during which time the bacteria broke down antinutrients like phytic acid, pre-digested gluten, produced beneficial organic acids, created natural probiotics, lowered glycemic impact, improved mineral absorption, and turned dough into something the human digestive system could process with ease. While modern bread is fermented with a single aggressive species of industrial yeast designed for speed, not health, which inflates dough rapidly without breaking down complex carbohydrates, resulting in bread that spikes blood sugar, causes bloating, increases digestive strain, and leaves the gut microbiome undernourished and unbalanced. In medieval Europe, fermentation was slow, patient, and biological, giving bread a depth of nutrition that modern bread, with its reduced fermentation times and chemical boosters, simply cannot match. Furthermore, medieval bread contained no artificial softeners, no chemical preservatives, no flavor enhancers, no bleaching agents, no stabilizers, no dough conditioners, no artificial vitamins, and no emulsifiers, which are today found in nearly every commercial loaf and associated with digestive issues, inflammation, and long-term metabolic problems, because medieval bread was baked from nothing but grain, water, and salt, sometimes a few wild herbs, sometimes a little honey, but never the laboratory-designed additives that dominate modern bread. And when medieval people consumed bread, they ate it not as a fluffy, empty-calorie snack, but as a dense, hearty, fiber-rich foundation of meals, paired with fermented vegetables, broths, meats, and stews that balanced blood sugar and supported sustained energy release, in contrast to modern bread, which often causes rapid spikes and crashes due to its refined starch content. Medieval bread also varied seasonally, meaning people consumed different nutrient profiles based on the time of year, and the ovens used clay, brick, or stone baked the loaves slowly and evenly, preserving nutrients instead of destroying them with the extremely high industrial heat techniques of modern baking. Even the hydration levels were different. Medieval dough was wetter, stickier, and far more challenging to work with, which created naturally aligned gluten strands that were easier to digest, while modern dough often uses chemical relaxers and stabilizers to give bread its signature softness at the cost of gut irritation. The medieval relationship with bread was holistic, acting as a cornerstone of community, culture, and physical survival, giving people sustained strength for labor, long winters, and nutrient-scarce periods. While modern bread often contributes to widespread issues like insulin resistance, nutrient deficiencies, inflammation, and digestive disorders, because it has been transformed into a synthetic food-like product optimized for profit margins, speed, and softness rather than human nourishment. The contrast between the two is so vast that they are almost not the same food at all. Medieval bread was dense, mineral-packed, fermented, fiber-rich, and alive, while modern bread is airy, nutrient, enzymed additive, heavy, and biologically disruptive. And when you bite into a medieval loaf, or as close as one can recreate it today, you are eating something that resembles both food and medicine, something that feeds not just the stomach, but the microbiome and immune system. While a slice of modern commercial bread often acts more like a chemical sponge that fills the belly without nourishing the body. Thus, when we say medieval bread was a superfood, while your modern bread makes you sick, we are not exaggerating. We are simply recognizing that one came from the rhythms of nature and human tradition, while the other comes from factories, laboratories, and mass production technology. Understanding this difference is the first essential step to understanding the evolution of human nutrition, how civilizations thrived, and how modern diets have drifted far from the foods our bodies evolved to process, making medieval bread not just a historical artifact, but a powerful nutritional model for the future. As we move deeper into the world of medieval bread, it becomes clear that understanding why it functioned like a superfood requires us to look not only at grains, milling, and fermentation, but also at the entire cultural, environmental, and social ecosystem that surrounded bread production. Because medieval bread was not just a nutritional product, it was a living symbol of the relationship between human beings and the natural world. And this relationship influenced everything from agricultural practices to daily rituals, from community bonds to long-term health, and even today, when we compare medieval bread to its modern industrial equivalent, the most striking difference is how deeply connected the former was to the rhythms of nature and how completely disconnected the latter has become. In medieval villages, bread was the heart of communal life, and entire communities shared the responsibilities of sowing, harvesting, grinding, fermenting, and baking, creating a system in which the knowledge of bread making was passed down generationally, continually refined and deeply respected, because bread was essential to survival, not a casual convenience as it often is today. And this deep respect meant that every step of the process was done with careful attention, patience, and a level of craftsmanship that industrialization nearly erased. Farmers grew grains based on local climates, soil conditions, and ecological diversity. And because there were no chemical fertilizers or pesticides, the grains absorbed minerals directly from the environment, making every loaf a reflection of the land itself, a concept called terroir, which modern bread completely lacks due to standardized grain production and mass global distribution. And when medieval families or local bakers prepared dough, they understood the nature of wild fermentation intuitively. They knew that bread required time, warmth, rest, and living microorganisms to transform the flour into something digestible. And this understanding was so ingrained in their culture that sourdough starters were treated almost like family members, fed daily, handed down through generations, and kept alive for decades, sometimes even centuries, which gave medieval bread a microbiological richness that created resilience in the human digestive system. The people of the Middle Ages consumed bread that literally adapted to their environment, their climate, and their microbial ecosystem, meaning the food they ate was in harmony with their body, gut, and immune function. Whereas modern bread is created in sterile environments designed to eliminate microbial diversity, resulting in food that may be uniform and convenient, but is biologically foreign to the human gut, contributing to a rise in gluten sensitivities, digestive disorders, and immune system imbalance. Furthermore, medieval bread varied hugely in texture, density, and flavor depending on regional customs in Northern Europe. Rye breads dominated and provided slow-release energy that kept laborers strong through long winters, while in Southern Europe, wheat and barley blends created lighter but still nutrient-dense loaves that paired perfectly with olive oil, herbs, and fermented vegetables. And in all these regions, bread was baked in communal ovens, slow-heated clay or stone structures that retained warmth, and evenly baked loaves for hours, preserving nutrients and creating crusts rich in natural antioxidants like melanin. While modern high-speed ovens often destroy delicate nutrients due to aggressive temperatures designed to maximize production rather than preserve food quality. And the medieval diet did not rely on bread alone. Bread acted as a nutrient delivery system, a foundation for meals, a way to stretch proteins and vegetables, and often a tool that absorbed broths, stews, fats, and fermented foods. creating a microbiome-friendly combination that worked in synergy. While modern bread is typically consumed alone, paired with sugary spreads, processed meats, and artificial ingredients, which further increases its negative impact on the body. Another crucial factor is that medieval people expended immense physical energy daily, walking long distances, farming, carrying heavy loads, and working outdoors, meaning their bodies were primed to process dense, fiber-rich bread efficiently, whereas modern sedentary lifestyles, combined with highly refined carbohydrates, create a metabolic mismatch that leads to weight gain, fatigue, and chronic inflammation. But even beyond nutrition and digestion, medieval bread functioned as a stabilizing cultural force. Bakeries were places of community gathering. Bread making was an intergenerational skill, and loaves had symbolic meaning. They represented harvest, protection, faith, and unity. And because bread was so essential, regulations existed to protect its quality, such as the Assize of Bread and Ale in England, which ensured bakers used honest weights, pure grains, and safe practices, meaning medieval societies often had higher bread standards than those in modern industrial food systems, where additives and shortcuts are legal and widespread. And when scarcity struck during winters, famines, or wars, medieval bread preserved life, as bakers incorporated ground, legumes, seeds, nuts, and even dried fruits to maintain nutrition, whereas modern bread, stripped of complexity and relying on artificial fluffiness, would never sustain human life in such conditions. The medieval relationship to bread, therefore, was not merely practical, but deeply physiological and psychological. Bread gave people strength, identity, continuity, and trust in their food system. And when we compare this to modern bread, bleached, chemically enhanced, nutritionally depleted, and biologically disruptive, we begin to understand why people today struggle with digestive problems, allergic reactions, and metabolic imbalances that were far less common in societies whose food came from natural, slow, and diverse systems. The body evolved to work with bread that was fermented slowly, packed with fiber, rich in minerals, dense in microbial life, and made from whole grains grown in living soil. And it was never meant to process bread that is essentially a refined starch sponge filled with industrial additives. In this contrast lies the deepest truth. Medieval bread did not make people sick because it was aligned with human biology, while modern bread often harms people because it is aligned with industrial efficiency. To understand this difference is to understand how food shapes health, how societies rise and fall, and how returning to ancient methods may be the key to restoring balance in a world where convenience has replaced quality and tradition has been overshadowed by technology. Medieval bread was not perfect, but it was human, natural, alive, and nourishing in a way that modern bread rarely is. And recognizing this allows us to see bread not merely as a food, but as a reflection of human history, evolution, and our changing relationship with the earth itself. The final layer of understanding why medieval bread functioned as a superfood lies not just in the grains, milling, fermentation, and cultural significance, but in the subtle ways in which every aspect of its production and consumption reinforced human health and longevity. because medieval bread was the culmination of an entire biological, ecological, and social system that modern bread has entirely abandoned, beginning with the physical and chemical properties of the loaf itself. Unlike modern white bread, which is light, fluffy, and nutritionally sparse, medieval bread was dense, heavy, and complex, containing an intricate balance of fibers, proteins, complex carbohydrates, essential minerals, vitamins, and beneficial microorganisms that fed not only the digestive system, but also the gut microbiome, which in turn strengthened immune function, stabilized mental clarity, supported energy regulation, and enhanced nutrient absorption from other foods, creating a synergistic effect that modern bread can never replicate because it has been stripped of almost all fiber, minerals, enzymes, and microbial life. The fermentation process, as previously noted, was crucial, but it is worth emphasizing that the naturally occurring lactic acid bacteria and wild yeasts in sourdough starters did far more than simply leaven the dough. They produced a multitude of bioactive compounds, pre-digested gluten, neutralized anti-nutrients like phytic acid, enhanced B vitamin synthesis, created short-chain fatty acids during digestion, and acted as a living probiotic source that continuously nourished the gut flora, whereas modern industrial yeast works in a matter of minutes, produces none of these bioactive compounds, and often leaves the bread compositionally hostile to human digestion. Medieval bakers understood intuitively that time, temperature, and hydration mattered deeply. So, dough was handled slowly and carefully, allowed to ferment for many hours or even days, often in containers kept at ambient temperatures that encouraged microbial diversity, and baked in ovens that imparted slow, even heat, forming thick crusts rich in naturally occurring antioxidants called which protected the interior nutrients and contributed to longer shelf life without artificial chemicals. Whereas modern fast-baked bread is heated at industrial temperatures designed to speed production, but often denatures proteins, kills beneficial bacteria, and destroys heat-sensitive vitamins. The physical density and fiber content of medieval bread also contributed to glycemic stability, creating slow-release energy that sustained medieval laborers, soldiers, and travelers, whereas modern bread, with its refined starches and soft textures, spikes blood sugar, leading to insulin surges, energy crashes, inflammation, and fat storage, showing that the structural integrity of bread is as important as its chemical composition in determining its health effects. Moreover, medieval bread was often enriched naturally with seeds, legumes, herbs, or even small amounts of dried fruits, all of which added micronutrients, essential fatty acids, and antioxidants, creating a nutrient synergy that modern bread, typically stripped to a single refined flour and water base, cannot match. This multi-dimensional nutritional value extended to hydration and satiety, because dense medieval loaves required longer chewing, which naturally slowed digestion, enhanced saliva production, improved nutrient absorption, and created a prolonged feeling of fullness. Whereas modern airy bread can be eaten rapidly and digested quickly, contributing to overeating and the modern cycle of hunger and snacking. Beyond the biological effects, medieval bread supported mental, cultural, and spiritual health, because bread was a shared resource, a ritualized part of life, and a daily reminder of human connection to the land and the labor of others, giving people psychological stability, social cohesion, and purpose. Whereas modern bread is often consumed in isolation, prepackaged and devoid of social context, removing these ancillary benefits. Environmental factors also played a critical role. Grains were grown in nutrient-rich soils with natural crop rotation. Wild microorganisms in the soil contributed to nutrient density, and local climates and ecological diversity further enriched the food chain, meaning that every loaf of bread was not only a product of human effort, but a reflection of the surrounding ecosystem. Whereas modern grains are typically monocropped, chemically treated, and globally transported, severing the direct link between the food and the land from which it originates. Additionally, the medieval understanding of portioning, loaf sizes, and communal distribution ensured that bread consumption supported healthy caloric intake without excess, while modern marketing and convenience culture encourage overconsumption of refined bread products, contributing to obesity, metabolic disorders, and nutrient dilution. The act of consuming bread in medieval times also promoted mindfulness and intentional eating, because its density and preparation required attention and care. While modern consumption encourages rushed, medicinally, medieval bread often acted as a vehicle for preserving other nutrients, absorbing stews, fermented vegetables, and natural fats, creating composite meals with enhanced bioavailability of nutrients, essentially a natural multivitamin embedded in daily food. While modern bread is rarely paired in ways that maximize nutrient absorption and instead often amplifies the negative metabolic effects of other processed foods. In short, medieval bread's superfood qualities were the result of a perfect convergence of ancient grains, microbial fermentation, slow and careful baking, fiber-rich structure, cultural integration, seasonal adaptation, ecological richness, and mindful consumption. Whereas modern bread's deficiencies arise from refined grains, artificial yeasts, chemical additives, high-speed industrial baking, nutrient stripping, ecological disconnect, and sedentary lifestyles, making it both biologically incomplete and potentially harmful. Recognizing this, we can see that the medieval loaf was not merely sustenance, but a living, nutrient-dense, life-supporting food engineered by tradition, necessity, and ecological wisdom, and that its decline in modern diets explains many contemporary health issues related to gut integrity, immune resilience, energy stability, and chronic inflammation. In conclusion, medieval bread's enduring lessons are clear, slow, natural, and biologically harmonious processes produce nourishment that supports both the body and mind, while industrial shortcuts produce convenience at the expense of human health. And by studying, preserving, or even reviving these traditional bread-making methods, we can reclaim some of the nutritional intelligence lost over centuries, ensuring that bread once again becomes a superfood that heals, sustains, and connects us to our heritage and the living ecosystems upon which we depend. The story of bread does not end with the medieval rather, it evolves through centuries of human innovation, cultural exchange, and technological advancement. And understanding this transformation is key to seeing how our modern bread came to differ. so drastically from its historical predecessors. Because the evolution of bread is intertwined with shifts in agriculture, urbanization, industrialization, and human diet, tracing a path from simple stone-ground loaves to the complex, mass-produced breads we consume today, beginning with the Renaissance period, when increased trade and the introduction of new grains and techniques created opportunities for experimentation and refinement in baking. Yet these early innovations still prioritized nutrition, flavor, and sustainability over speed or uniformity. And it was not until the Industrial Revolution that bread began to diverge dramatically from its ancient, nutrient-rich roots. As the invention of mechanical roller mills, chemical yeasts, and mass-production ovens created a product optimized for texture, appearance, shelf life, and commercial scalability rather than for human health. And this divergence is at the heart of why modern bread often contributes to digestive issues, blood sugar spikes, and nutrient deficiencies, because the very processes that allowed bread to be produced faster and cheaper simultaneously stripped it of fiber, micronutrients, enzymes, and natural microbial communities, resulting in a product that is biologically incomplete, yet highly palatable and socially ubiquitous. Historically, the Renaissance and early modern periods saw bakers experimenting with refined milling techniques, creating lighter loaves for the elite while peasant breads retained density. Whole grains and fermentation practices, meaning social class, often determined nutritional quality. But even elite breads were rarely bleached, chemically altered, or processed with the industrial additives common today. And the reliance on natural starters persisted, allowing sourdough and other fermentation methods to continue supplying probiotics, pre-digested proteins, and enhanced mineral absorption, which maintained the health benefits of bread across populations. However, the Industrial Revolution introduced profound shifts, beginning with mechanized grain milling that removed bran and germ to create a uniform, fine white flour, and the development of commercial baker's yeast, a single species rapidly fermenting dough, which eliminated slow fermentation, microbial diversity, and natural flavor complexity. And the combination of refined flour, rapid fermentation, and high-speed baking created bread that was easy to produce, light and fluffy, and visually appealing, but depleted in nutrition, less digestible, and more likely to cause glycemic spikes, bloating, and inflammation, highlighting the trade-offs between industrial efficiency and human biology. And these trade-offs only worsened as chemical additives like dough conditioners, preservatives, bleaching agents, and flavor enhancers became commonplace, ensuring consistency and shelf life at the cost of natural nutritional integrity. While bread consumption shifted from a central, nutrient-dense staple to a convenient, empty-calorie filler integrated into processed meals. Simultaneously, urbanization altered the social and cultural significance of bread, as communal ovens and village bakeries were replaced with commercial bakeries supplying growing cities, severing the connection between producer and consumer, which further diminished the cultural, psychological, and ritual aspects of bread that historically reinforced healthy eating patterns. And this disconnection contributed to a more passive relationship with food, where bread became a commodity rather than a living food, consumed rapidly and mindlessly rather than integrated thoughtfully into meals. and modern bread marketing reinforced this, emphasizing softness, sweetness, and convenience over nutrition, tradition, or ecological harmony, creating a product designed to appeal to human taste buds while neglecting gut health, micronutrient density, and metabolic balance. The introduction of refined white flour, chemical yeast, and industrial baking also coincided with the rise of sugar, fats, and processed ingredients in diets, compounding bread's negative effects because these ingredients, when paired with nutrient-stripped bread, accelerate insulin spikes, oxidative stress, inflammation, and microbiome disruption, which medieval populations largely avoided due to slower digestion, fiber-rich bread, and naturally fermented accompaniments, illustrating how changes in bread technology interact with broader dietary patterns to affect human health. In addition, mechanization and centralization of bread production led to the creation of long supply chains, requiring preservatives, stabilizers, and bleaching agents to maintain freshness during transport, further compromising nutritional quality, while medieval bread, by contrast, was typically baked locally and consumed within hours or days, ensuring maximal retention of nutrients, probiotics, and enzymatic activity, and creating a direct, sustainable connection between farmers, bakers, and consumers that reinforced ecological and nutritional integrity. Through these centuries, bread also became increasingly standardized, with uniform shapes, textures, and flavors prioritized for mass appeal, whereas medieval loaves varied seasonally, regionally, and even from batch to batch, reflecting the local grains, soils, fermentation, microbes, and baker skill. And this diversity ensured a broader range of nutrients, polyphenols, fibers, and beneficial bacteria in the diet, a stark contrast to modern homogenized bread that provides monotone nutrition and minimal microbial diversity, contributing to contemporary health challenges such as autoimmune disorders, obesity, metabolic syndrome, and digestive sensitivities. Yet, despite these losses, bread remains central to human culture, and the history of its transformation offers a roadmap for reclaiming some of its lost benefits. By highlighting the importance of slow fermentation, whole grains, microbial diversity, fiber content, and local, ecologically informed production practices, illustrating that the decline of bread's nutritional power is not inevitable, but contingent upon human choices and technological pathways, and that by understanding these historical developments, we gain insight into how modern bread came to be both a convenience and a liability, and why returning to traditional methods, even partially, can restore the health, flavor, and resilience that bread once provided, connecting people to their food, their communities, and the land that sustains them. This chapter, therefore, emphasizes that the transformation of bread over time is not merely a culinary story, but a deeply biological, social, and ecological narrative, showing that modern bread's shortcomings are directly tied to industrialization, mechanization, chemical intervention, and urbanization, while medieval and early modern bread thrived precisely because it was slow, living, nutrient-rich, and integrated into human ecosystems, illustrating that the principles of slow, natural, and biologically aligned food production are not archaic, but remain profoundly relevant for human health today, and that any attempt to recreate the benefits of bread must consider not just the ingredients, but the process, the microbes, the soil, the fermentation, and the cultural context, because bread's history demonstrates that nutrition, digestibility, and health are inseparable from tradition, ecology, and careful craftsmanship, and modern industrial bread has largely forgotten these lessons, offering a cautionary tale about the consequences of prioritizing convenience and uniformity over biology and sustainability, and reinforcing why revisiting the methods, values, and wisdom embedded in traditional bread making is essential for restoring the health and vitality that once came naturally from a simple loaf. As the industrial era progressed and urban populations expanded rapidly, bread production increasingly prioritized efficiency, uniformity, and profit over nutrition, flavor, or ecological harmony. And this shift marked a turning point in the story of bread, because the technologies and practices that enabled mass production also fundamentally altered its biological, chemical, and cultural properties, creating a product that looks and tastes appealing but often undermines human health. Beginning with the widespread adoption of refined wheat flour, which removed the bran and germ to produce a light, white, consistent product that could survive long transport and extended storage, yet stripped away the fiber, minerals, vitamins, antioxidants, and healthy oils that were naturally present in whole grains, leaving a carbohydrate-dense but nutritionally hollow substrate that feeds blood sugar spikes and contributes to chronic disease. In stark contrast to the dense, nutrient-rich loaves of the medieval era, the advent of commercial yeast further accelerated bread making, reducing fermentation times from hours or days to mere minutes, which eliminated the natural processes that predigested gluten, neutralized antinutrients like phytic acid, and generated beneficial organic acids and probiotics, meaning that modern bread, while soft and fast to produce, often causes digestive discomfort, bloating, and microbiome imbalances, whereas traditional sourdough retained microbial complexity that supported digestion, nutrient absorption, and immune resilience. Industrial ovens, designed for high-speed baking, often destroy delicate enzymes and heat-sensitive vitamins while creating uniform textures and chemical additives, including dough conditioners, bleaching agents, emulsifiers, preservatives, and artificial flavorings, became standard to maintain consistency, improve shelf life, and appeal to consumer tastes. But these interventions further separated bread from the nutritional and biological qualities that once defined it, creating a product that is biologically inert and sometimes inflammatory. This transformation was reinforced by societal changes, as urbanization and factory work disconnected consumers from the source of their bread, eliminating communal ovens, village bakeries, and generational knowledge, and replacing them with large-scale commercial bakeries where loaves were mass-produced with little care, contributing to a cultural loss in which bread became an anonymous, disposable commodity rather than a living, community-centered staple. And the psychological and ritual benefits that once accompanied bread consumption, mindful preparation, social sharing, connection to land and labor, diminished alongside its nutritional value, illustrating how culture, biology, and ecology were inseparably linked in traditional bread but fragmented in modern industrial contexts. Additionally, The standardization of grain varieties and mechanized milling resulted in a dramatic reduction in genetic diversity of wheat, rye, and other cereals, making modern bread more uniform but less resilient and less nutrient-dense than its historical counterparts, while ancient and medieval grains like emmer and spelt offered a variety of minerals, proteins, and complex carbohydrates that modern wheat cannot replicate. Modern diets compounded the problem, as refined bread was often paired with sugar-laden spreads, processed meats, and industrial fats, accelerating glycemic spikes, oxidative stress, inflammation, and microbiome disruption. Whereas medieval and early modern bread was integrated into meals with fermented vegetables, broths, and natural fats that created balanced, synergistic nutrition. Further, marketing and consumer habits encouraged convenience over quality, making soft, airy, pre-sliced loaves the norm, often consumed in isolation or fast meals, which reduces satiety, overfeeds the metabolic system, and disconnects people from the act of mindful eating, whereas historically dense, chewy loaves required effort to slice, chew, and digest, slowing metabolism appropriately and enhancing nutrient uptake. Even minor details mattered: hydration levels, fermentation duration, flour-to-water ratios, oven temperatures, and loaf shapes in traditional bread all contributed to digestibility, nutrient retention, and microbial balance. While modern bread-making treats these parameters as industrial variables optimized for speed and profitability rather than human biology, the transformation of bread over these centuries illustrates not only a technological shift, but also an ecological and social rupture, as industrial grain farming, chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and global supply chains severed the intimate link between humans, their food, and the environment. Whereas medieval bread was a reflection of local terroir soil richness, seasonal variation, microbial ecology, and human craftsmanship, meaning that every loaf carried the unique imprint of place, community, and living biology, while modern bread is largely generic, anonymous, and biologically inert. This history underscores the importance of returning, at least partially, to slow, natural, ecologically integrated bread making, whether through sourdough fermentation, whole grain milling, or community-centered baking practices, because the lessons of the past are directly relevant to modern health challenges. From metabolic syndrome to gut dysbiosis, inflammation, and nutrient deficiencies. And embracing these lessons can help restore not only digestive resilience and micronutrient density, but also social cohesion, mindfulness, and cultural connection. In essence, the evolution of bread is a cautionary tale about the consequences of industrial efficiency prioritized over human biology, nutrition, and ecological integrity. And while modern bread serves the purposes of mass convenience and aesthetic uniformity, it cannot replicate the living, nutrient-rich, culturally embedded, microbiologically diverse properties that once made bread a true superfood, highlighting the profound impact of technological, social, and ecological choices on human health, and providing a roadmap for how intentional, informed, and ecologically mindful bread making can help bridge the gap between historical nourishment and contemporary needs, illustrating that the quality of bread is inseparable from the quality of human life. The integrity of food systems and the preservation of culinary wisdom. And that, rediscovering the principles of traditional bread, offers both a practical and philosophical path, stronger digestion, and a healthier, more grounded relationship with the food we eat every day. The culmination of bread's transformation over the centuries reveals not only the technical evolution of ingredients, milling, fermentation, and baking, but also the profound ways in which industrialization, urbanization, and commercialization reshaped the human relationship with one of the most fundamental foods in history. Because modern bread, while visually uniform, convenient, and palatable, represents a dramatic departure from the biological, cultural, and ecological principles that once made it a super. And understanding this divergence requires examining the interplay between human physiology, microbial ecosystems, and societal changes, beginning with the way industrial practices replaced slow, artisanal fermentation with rapid chemical yeast, which, while efficient, eliminated the beneficial lactic acid bacteria and wild yeasts that naturally predigest gluten, neutralize antinutrients, produce organic acids, and create probiotic effects, meaning that modern bread is often harder to digest, less nutritionally bioavailable, and more likely to disrupt the gut microbiome. Whereas traditional sourdough fermentation created living food capable of supporting digestive health and metabolic stability. Simultaneously, mechanized milling stripped whole grains of their bran and germ to produce fine, uniform flour, removing fiber, vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients, while creating carbohydrate-dense starch that rapidly elevates blood sugar, contributing to insulin spikes, inflammation, and energy crashes. In stark contrast to medieval and early modern bread that delivered slow-release energy, micronutrient density, and enzymatic activity, and promoted long-term health in ways modern bread rarely does. Industrial baking ovens, designed to optimize speed and output, frequently destroy heat-sensitive vitamins, enzymes, and microbial life, while chemical additives such as bleaching agents, emulsifiers, dough conditioners, and preservatives ensure uniform texture and extended shelf life at the expense of biological functionality, effectively transforming bread from a living, nutrient-rich food into a product that is convenient but nutritionally sterile, creating a disconnect between the human body's evolutionary needs and the processed foods now consumed daily. Moreover, modern bread production severed the cultural, communal, and ecological contexts that once defined it. As urban populations grew and village bakeries disappeared, leaving consumers with anonymous, factory-made loaves and eroding the traditions, rituals, and knowledge that had reinforced mindful preparation, intentional consumption, and connection to local grains and ecosystems. Whereas medieval bread was inextricably linked to place, season, soil, microbial diversity, and community, creating a living food that nourished body, mind, and society simultaneously. The reduction in genetic diversity of grains exacerbated this decline, as modern wheat, rye, and barley have been selectively bred for yield, softness, and baking properties, rather than nutritional content or digestibility, while ancient grains, like spelt, emmer, and einkorn offered a variety of proteins, minerals, antioxidants, and fiber that supported human physiology in ways industrial wheat cannot replicate. And this genetic bottleneck, combined with chemical fertilizers and monocrop practices, further diminishes the nutrient density and ecological integrity of contemporary bread, illustrating how technological interventions in agriculture and baking profoundly affect human health. Additionally, modern bread is often consumed alongside ultra-processed foods, sugars, and refined fats, compounding metabolic, inflammatory, and digestive stress. While traditional bread was consumed in a holistic dietary context with fermented vegetables, broths, proteins, and healthy fats, maximizing nutrient synergy and gut health. And this shift underscores the importance of context in food consumption. It is not merely the loaf itself, but how it integrates with meals, microbial ecosystems, and human activity that defines its impact on health. The structure and texture of bread also play a role. Dense, chewy loaves of the past required deliberate slicing, chewing, and digestion, enhancing satiety, enzymatic activity, and nutrient uptake, whereas soft, airy industrial breads are rapidly consumed, rapidly digested, and more likely to contribute to overeating, metabolic strain, and reduced absorption, highlighting that physical form matters as much as chemical composition in determining the healthfulness of bread. As a cultural artifact, bread historically reinforced social cohesion, identity, and mindfulness, with bakers serving not merely as producers but as guardians of nutrition, tradition, and communal well-being, whereas modern bread production prioritizes profit, efficiency, and homogeneity, eroding the cultural, psychological, and ecological benefits that once accompanied consumption, which in turn contributes to the widespread disconnect between humans and their food systems, reducing both nutritional outcomes and the sense of belonging and continuity that food once provided. This history emphasizes that the nutritional and health decline of modern bread is not an accident, but a direct consequence of industrial, technological, and social choices, including refined flour, chemical additives, mass fermentation, mechanization, urbanization, and global supply chains. And understanding these factors allows us to identify pathways for restoring bread's former benefits through slow fermentation, whole grain use, artisanal practices, local sourcing, ecological integration, and mindful consumption, illustrating that the principles embedded in traditional bread making are not relics of the past, but essential guides for creating food that aligns with human biology, supports metabolic stability, strengthens the microbiome, delivers micronutrients, and reinforces cultural and ecological continuity. Ultimately, the story of bread's transformation underscores that while modern bread serves convenience and aesthetics, it often fails to meet the fundamental needs of human physiology and culture, whereas historical bread, grown, milled, fermented, and baked with care, was a true superfood in every sense: dense, nutrient-rich, microbiologically alive, ecologically connected, and culturally significant. And reclaiming these principles today offers a pathway not only to better nutrition and digestive health, but also to renewed connection to land, tradition, community, and the living systems that sustain us, demonstrating that the lessons of bread's evolution are as vital for modern health as they are for understanding the deep interconnections between human activity, food, and the natural world. To truly understand Why medieval bread functioned as a superfood, while modern bread often contributes to illness. It is essential to examine the science behind bread and human health. Because bread is not merely a source of calories, but a complex interaction of macronutrients, micronutrients, fibers, and living microorganisms that interact with the human body at multiple biological levels, beginning with the composition of grains themselves, which are dense repositories, proteins, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and fiber. And in the medieval period, grains were minimally processed, stone-ground, and often naturally aged, preserving their full complement of nutrients. Whereas modern bread flour is highly refined, stripped of bran and germ, resulting in a product that is primarily starch with minimal fiber, lower vitamin content, and depleted mineral levels, which significantly alters its effect on human metabolism and digestive physiology. Fermentation is equally critical, as medieval sourdough and wild yeast breads underwent long, natural fermentation periods during which microorganisms pre-digested gluten, broke down anti-nutrients like phytic acid, produced organic acids, enriched B vitamins, and created probiotic organisms, resulting in a living food that nourished the gut microbiome, enhanced nutrient absorption, stabilized blood sugar, and even supported mental health. Whereas modern industrial yeast ferments dough rapidly in minutes, producing none of these benefits and often leaving the bread harder to digest and more inflammatory. Fiber content, often overlooked in modern diets, is another defining factor. Dense medieval bread contained soluble and insoluble fibers that slowed digestion, regulated blood sugar, promoted satiety, and supported the growth of beneficial gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids. While modern white bread is nearly devoid of fiber, leading to rapid glucose absorption, insulin spikes, digestive irregularities, and impaired microbial diversity, which can manifest as chronic inflammation, obesity, autoimmune disorders, and metabolic dysfunction. The mineral content of bread also matters profoundly because whole grains naturally provide magnesium, iron, zinc, selenium, and phosphorus, all essential cofactors for enzymatic reactions, immune function, and metabolic regulation, whereas refined flour loses a significant proportion of these minerals. And although some modern breads are enriched, the nutrients are often in isolated forms with limited bioavailability and no microbial synergy, making them less effective at supporting human health. Antioxidants formed during traditional baking, particularly through Maillard reactions in slow, high-heat crust formation, further distinguish medieval bread, as these compounds scavenge free radicals, reduce oxidative stress, and contribute to overall cellular protection, whereas industrial high-speed baking often prevents proper antioxidant formation, leaving bread biologically inert. Glycemic response is a crucial aspect because the dense structure, high fiber, and natural fermentation of medieval bread led to slow-release carbohydrates, reducing insulin surges, stabilizing energy levels, and supporting long-term metabolic health, while soft, airy, rapidly baked modern breads act like sugar, rapidly elevating blood glucose, overloading the pancreas, and contributing to insulin resistance over time. The microbiome connection cannot be overstated, as naturally fermented breads supply live bacteria and their metabolites to the gut, promoting a balanced microbiota that influences immunity, digestion, brain function, and even mood, whereas modern bread contains little to no live microbes, meaning it fails to support these crucial systems. And in fact, additives like emulsifiers may disrupt gut lining and microbial balance. From a protein perspective, the slow fermentation of medieval bread partially predigested gluten and other proteins, making them easier to absorb and less likely to provoke inflammatory responses. Whereas industrial bread retains proteins in forms that are sometimes difficult to digest and may exacerbate sensitivities. Additionally, the interaction of bread with other foods amplifies its nutritional effect, as medieval diets paired bread with fermented vegetables, natural fats, broths, legumes, and occasionally dairy or meat, creating synergistic nutrient absorption and stable blood sugar, whereas modern bread is frequently eaten with highly processed spreads, sugars, and industrial fats, further stressing metabolism and undermining health. Beyond these biochemical and microbiological aspects, the very physical characteristics of bread matter. Dense loaves required deliberate chewing, which stimulated saliva production, digestive enzymes, and satiety hormones, whereas fluffy, pre-sliced modern loaves can be consumed rapidly, impairing digestion and encouraging overconsumption. Hydration levels, fermentation time, flour-to-water ratios, and baking temperatures all influenced nutrient availability, enzyme activity, and microbial health, and medieval bakers intuitively optimized these variables for health and taste, while modern industrial processes prioritize efficiency and uniformity over nutritional outcomes. Finally, the science of bread illustrates that nutrition is not isolated to macronutrients, but extends to living microbial ecosystems, structural integrity, enzyme activity, antioxidant content, mineral bioavailability, fiber, fermentation metabolites, and synergistic consumption with other foods. And medieval bread exemplifies this integrated approach, functioning as a true superfood that nourished body, mind, and microbiome, while modern bread, stripped of complexity, biologically inert, and often consumed with processed foods, fails to meet these physiological requirements, explaining why contemporary populations increasingly struggle with digestive disorders, metabolic syndrome, autoimmune conditions, and inflammation, and highlighting the profound impact that traditional bread making could have if reintroduced into modern diets as a model of biologically aligned, microbiologically rich, nutritionally dense, and ecologically integrated food. The exploration of bread and human health deepens when we examine not only the biological effects of grains, fermentation, and fiber, but also the systemic consequences of consuming modern industrial bread. Because every change in processing, ingredient selection, and preparation method has cascading effects on digestion, metabolism, immunity, and mental well-being. And medieval bread serves as a remarkable contrast, demonstrating how slow, natural, and ecologically attuned practices produced a food that nourished the body holistically, beginning with the composition of the grain itself, as ancient and medieval grains contained the full spectrum of bran, germ, endosperm, and associated phytochemicals, which provided complex carbohydrates, proteins, essential fats, antioxidants, vitamins such as B1, B2, B3, and minerals including magnesium, zinc, iron, and selenium, all in bioavailable forms, whereas modern white flour is stripped of most of these nutrients, leaving a simple starch that spikes blood sugar, promotes insulin resistance, and contributes to chronic inflammation. Fermentation further differentiates the two eras. Because medieval sourdough fermentation relied on diverse lactic acid bacteria and wild yeasts that predigested gluten, created organic acids, neutralized phytic acid, synthesized vitamins, and produced probiotics that directly supported gut microbiota composition, enhancing nutrient absorption, strengthening immunity, stabilizing mood, and regulating inflammation, while industrial bread made with fast-acting commercial yeast lacks these processes, leaving gluten less digestible anti-nutrients intact, and microbial diversity absent and contributing to digestive discomfort, bloating, and long-term microbiome disruption. Fiber content is another critical factor. Medieval breads, dense and minimally processed, contained both soluble and insoluble fibers that regulated blood sugar, slowed digestion, promoted satiety, and provided prebiotic substrates for beneficial gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids essential for colon health, immune regulation, and energy metabolism. While modern bread, refined and low in fiber, fails to provide these benefits, leading to rapid glucose absorption, insulin spikes, digestive irregularities, microbiome imbalances, and increased risk of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and systemic inflammation. Beyond these macronutrients, the micronutrients in medieval bread were present in synergistic forms that facilitated absorption and utilization, whereas modern enrichment often adds isolated vitamins and minerals, with limited bioavailability and no complementary compounds, meaning the body derives less benefit. And antioxidant formation during slow baking in stone ovens further contributed to cellular protection and oxidative stress reduction, which industrial high-speed ovens often fail to achieve. Glycemic response is tightly linked to structure and fermentation. Dense loaves, long fermentation, and intact fibers create slow-release carbohydrates that stabilize blood sugar and insulin responses, whereas soft, airy industrial breads trigger rapid glucose spikes, metabolic stress, and chronic energy fluctuations. The microbiome connection is equally vital, as traditional bread provides live microorganisms, metabolites, and prebiotics that support gut diversity, immune function, nutrient absorption, and even cognitive health. While modern bread offers little to no microbial benefit and can even disrupt gut lining through additives such as emulsifiers, protein digestibility is enhanced in traditional bread through fermentation, which partially hydrolyzes gluten and other proteins, reducing inflammatory potential and improving absorption. While industrial bread retains proteins in forms that are sometimes inflammatory or difficult to digest, the act of eating bread in medieval contexts also mattered. Deliberate chewing of dense loaves stimulated saliva production, digestive enzyme release, satiety signaling, and nutrient assimilation, whereas modern bread is engineered for softness and rapid consumption, undermining these physiological mechanisms and promoting overconsumption. Furthermore, medieval bread was integrated into meals rich in complementary foods, fermented vegetables, legumes, broths, fats, and occasionally dairy or meat, which created synergistic nutritional effects, stabilized glycemic response, and supported comprehensive metabolic health. Whereas modern diets often pair industrial bread with processed spreads, sugars, and fats, compounding metabolic and inflammatory stress. Hydration, fermentation time, flour-to-water ratios, oven temperature, and loaf density were all carefully balanced in traditional baking to maximize digestibility, nutrient retention, enzymatic activity, and microbial survival. Whereas modern processes prioritize speed, uniformity, and profitability, sacrificing nutrition and biological function. Social and cultural dimensions also contributed to health. Communal baking, village ovens, and generational knowledge reinforced mindful eating, ecological awareness, and dietary stability. Whereas urbanization, industrialization, and factory production removed these connections, leaving bread as an anonymous commodity with diminished psychological and social benefit. Collectively, these factors demonstrate that bread is not merely a food, but a biological, cultural, and ecological system, and the decline in its nutritional value over the past 2 centuries explains the rise in digestive disorders, metabolic syndrome, inflammation, and chronic disease in modern populations. Whereas medieval bread exemplifies a model of living food that supports metabolism, digestion, microbiome health, nutrient density, immune resilience, cognitive function, and social cohesion. In conclusion, understanding the science of bread and human health reveals that traditional bread-making practices slow fermentation, whole grains, dense structure, microbial diversity, careful hydration, long baking, and integrated dietary context are a blueprint for creating food that is not only nourishing but biologically and culturally aligned with human evolution. While modern industrial bread, stripped of complexity, fiber, micronutrients, and microbial life, demonstrates the consequences of prioritizing convenience, speed, and mass production over health, ecology, and tradition. And this scientific perspective underscores why reviving elements of historical bread-making can profoundly improve digestion, metabolic stability, microbiome resilience, nutrient absorption, energy balance, and overall human well-being in today's world. The final part of understanding the relationship between bread and human health emphasizes how modern industrial practices, while maximizing convenience, uniformity, and commercial appeal, have fundamentally disrupted the biological, nutritional, and cultural integrity that once made bread a soup. Because bread is not merely a carbohydrate vehicle, but a living, multifaceted food that interacts with human physiology, microbial ecosystems, and social systems. And medieval bread exemplifies how careful attention to ingredients, fermentation, structure, and preparation optimized digestion, nutrient availability, and systemic health, beginning with the holistic nature of grains themselves, which were minimally processed, stone-ground, and retained their bran, germ, and endosperm, providing fiber, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and healthy fats in forms readily utilized by the human body, whereas modern refined flour largely removes these components, leaving carbohydrate-dense, fiber, and nutrient-deficient bread that contributes to rapid glycemic spikes, insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, and impaired micronutrient absorption. The role of fermentation is equally critical, as traditional sourdough and wild yeast methods introduced a diversity of beneficial microbes that predigested gluten, neutralized antinutrients like phytic acid, synthesized B vitamins, produced organic acids, and populated the gut with probiotics, supporting microbiome diversity, digestive efficiency, immune function, and even mental health. Whereas commercial yeast ferments dough rapidly, bypassing these processes and resulting in bread that is biologically inert, less digestible, and potentially inflammatory. Fiber content in traditional bread not only slowed carbohydrate absorption, but also served as a prebiotic, feeding beneficial gut bacteria that generate short-chain fatty acids essential for colon health, systemic inflammation control, and metabolic regulation. While modern industrial breads, stripped of fiber, fail to support these systems, contributing to widespread gut dysbiosis, energy dysregulation, and chronic disease. Protein digestibility is enhanced in traditional bread through slow fermentation, which partially hydrolyzes gluten and other proteins, reducing allergenicity, inflammatory potential, and digestive stress. While industrial bread retains proteins in unmodified forms, often harder to digest and more likely to provoke sensitivities or inflammation. The integration of bread into the broader diet also mattered, as medieval bread was consumed with fermented vegetables, natural fats, broths, legumes, and occasional dairy or meat, creating synergistic nutrient absorption and metabolic stability. Whereas modern bread is frequently paired with processed spreads, refined sugars, and industrial fats, compounding glycemic fluctuations, inflammation, and metabolic strain. Even the physical act of eating bread played a role in health. Dense loaves required slow chewing, stimulating saliva production, enzyme activity, and satiety signals, whereas soft, airy industrial loaves encourage rapid consumption, decreased digestive signaling, and overconsumption, undermining both nutrient absorption and metabolic balance. Baking methods in traditional bread making preserved micronutrients, antioxidants, and enzymatic activity with careful control of hydration, fermentation time, and oven temperature, while industrial high-speed baking often destroys these beneficial components, resulting in biologically inert loaves. Culturally and socially, traditional bread was embedded in community rituals, ecological awareness, and shared culinary knowledge, reinforcing mindful consumption, connection to local grains, and respect for seasonal and environmental rhythms. Whereas modern industrial bread isolates consumers from production, eroding cultural ties, mindfulness, and the sense of food as a living, sustaining force, further disconnecting humans from the ecological and social systems that support health. Modern bread production also relies heavily on additives such as bleaching agents, emulsifiers, preservatives, and dough conditioners to maintain consistency and shelf life, which compromise microbial life, disrupt gut flora, and contribute to systemic inflammation, highlighting how the pursuit of industrial efficiency comes at the cost of nutrition, biology, and health. The glycemic impact of modern bread is profound, as rapid release carbohydrates spike blood sugar, stimulate insulin surges, and contribute to metabolic syndrome, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. While traditional breads, dense structure, high fiber content, and long fermentation moderated glucose release and supported metabolic resilience. The microbiome connection is central, as medieval breads introduced live bacteria and prebiotics that enhanced microbial diversity, immune competence, and nutrient synthesis, whereas modern bread lacks these benefits and sometimes contains compounds that impair microbial balance. The cumulative effect of these changes explains why contemporary populations face widespread digestive disorders, autoimmune conditions, chronic inflammation, and metabolic diseases, while historical populations consuming fermented, fiber-rich, and ecologically integrated bread, robust digestion, abundant micronutrients, and healthy microbiomes. Understanding this science underscores that bread is not simply a carbohydrate source, but a living, functional food where fermentation, microbial diversity, fiber, whole grains, baking methods, cultural integration, and meal context collectively determine health outcomes, and that the decline in these factors due to industrialization represents a profound shift away from biologically aligned nutrition. Reclaiming elements of traditional bread making, slow fermentation, whole grains, dense texture, microbial diversity, minimal processing, ecological sourcing, and mindful consumption offers a pathway to restore digestive resilience, metabolic balance, nutrient density, microbiome health, and social connection, demonstrating that the principles of historical bread are not antiquated but highly relevant for modern health, and that bridging the gap between traditional wisdom and contemporary food systems can transform bread from a source of metabolic stress into a superfood once again, nourishing body, mind, microbiome, and culture alike, and highlighting the interdependence of food, biology, and society in sustaining human well-being across generations. Bread has always been far more than just a source of calories. It has historically represented a living intersection of culture, ecology, and human survival, because the way bread was produced, consumed, and shared reflected not only nutritional wisdom, but also societal structures, agricultural knowledge, and ecological stewardship. And in the medieval era, this relationship was especially profound, as bread connected humans intimately to their land, grains, climate, and community, creating a food system that was deeply sustainable, biologically nourishing, and culturally resonant. Beginning with the local cultivation of diverse grains such as spelt, emmer, einkorn, rye, and barley, each adapted to regional soils, climates, and ecological conditions, providing a rich array of nutrients and flavors while supporting biodiversity and soil health. Whereas modern industrial bread relies on uniform, high-yield wheat varieties, often grown in monocultures with chemical fertilizers and pesticides, which increase yield but reduce nutrient density, harm soil microbiota, and erode ecological resilience. The process of milling further illustrates this divergence, as medieval stone grinding preserved the integrity of the grain, maintained natural oils, fiber, and micronutrients, and even allowed the microbial communities present in the flour to contribute to natural fermentation, while contemporary roller milling removes bran and germ to produce white flour, stripping it of vital nutrition and leaving it biologically inert, thereby demonstrating how technological choices directly influence both ecological and human health. fermentation and baking practices reinforced the cultural and ecological values of traditional bread as long. Natural sourdough fermentation not only enhanced flavor and digestibility, but also integrated local microbial diversity, reflected seasonal rhythms, and created a product that was both biologically alive and culturally meaningful. While industrialized bread making replaced these living processes with rapid yeast fermentation, chemical additives, and high-speed ovens, producing loaves that lack microbial life, flavor depth, and ecological connectedness. Sharing and consumption patterns also played a role in reinforcing community cohesion, because medieval bread was often baked in communal ovens, with knowledge passed through generations, fostering relationships, ritualized preparation, and a sense of belonging, whereas modern bread is largely anonymous, mass-produced and consumed individually, severing the social and cultural bonds that once surrounded this staple food. The ecological dimension extends further, as traditional bread making reflected an intimate understanding of the relationship between soil, grain, climate, and seasonal cycles, ensuring that grains were planted, harvested, stored, and baked in harmony with natural rhythms. Whereas industrial supply chains prioritize global distribution, shelf life, and economic efficiency over ecological balance, contributing to biodiversity loss, soil degradation, and nutrient-poor wheat, which in turn reduces the potential health benefits of the final bread. Historical bread was also intertwined with ritual, religion, and symbolism, reinforcing ethical and spiritual dimensions of food production and consumption. And these practices encouraged respect for the land, seasonal abundance, and communal responsibility. While modern bread has largely lost these symbolic and moral dimensions, functioning primarily as a commodity stripped of social and ecological meaning, even minor technical details mattered. Hydration, fermentation time, flour composition, and oven type influenced microbial viability, enzyme activity, nutrient retention, and digestibility, creating a product that nourished body, mind, and community. Whereas industrial processes prioritize speed, uniformity, and profit, often compromising both nutritional quality and ecological alignment. Traditional bread also promoted dietary balance, as it was integrated with seasonal fruits, vegetables, legumes, broths, dairy, and healthy fats, creating a holistic diet that supported microbiome diversity, metabolic stability, and nutrient synergy. While modern bread is frequently paired with refined sugars, processed spreads, and ultra-processed foods, which amplify metabolic stress, inflammation, and digestive disturbances, the aesthetic and sensory qualities of bread in historical context, dense texture, complex flavors, and aromas derived from slow fermentation engaged the senses and reinforced mindful eating. While modern industrial bread is engineered for softness, sweetness, and visual uniformity, diminishing sensory engagement and satiety, which can contribute to overeating and metabolic imbalance. Collectively, the cultural, ecological, and technical aspects of medieval bread exemplify a holistic system in which nutrition, microbiology, social cohesion, ecological stewardship, and sensory engagement were seamlessly integrated, whereas modern industrial bread reflects fragmentation, prioritizing efficiency and aesthetics over health, ecology, and cultural continuity, highlighting how the transformation of bread mirrors broader shifts in society from sustainable, localized systems to globalized, industrialized, and biologically detached food networks. Understanding this story underscores the importance of reclaiming aspects of traditional bread making, such as cultivating diverse grains, employing slow fermentation, preserving local microbial ecosystems, engaging in communal preparation, and fostering mindful consumption, because these practices not only enhance nutrient density, digestibility, and gut health, but also restore cultural richness, social connection, ecological balance, and respect for seasonal and environmental rhythms. And ultimately, medieval bread represents a model of sustainability, resilience, and integrated health that modern societies can draw upon to reconnect with the biological, cultural, and ecological wisdom embedded in this ancient staple, demonstrating that food is never merely sustenance, but a reflection of values, systems, and relationships, and that the decline in bread's quality over the past 2 centuries is as much a cultural and ecological loss as a nutritional one, offering both a cautionary tale and a roadmap for rebuilding health, community, and environmental stewardship through informed, mindful, and ecologically aligned bread-making practices. Continuing the exploration of bread as a cultural and ecological cornerstone, it becomes increasingly clear that medieval bread was a living nexus of nutrition, tradition, and environmental awareness, because every stage of its production, from grain cultivation to milling, fermentation, baking, and consumption, was intimately tied to local ecosystems, seasonal rhythms, and communal practices. And unlike modern industrial bread, which prioritizes speed, shelf life, and uniformity, historical bread making embraced complexity, diversity, and sustainability, beginning with the selection of grains that were adapted to specific soils, climates, and altitudes, including spelt, rye, einkorn, immer, and barley, which provided robust nutrient profiles, flavors, and resilience against pests and disease, while simultaneously supporting agricultural biodiversity, soil health, and ecological balance. Whereas contemporary wheat monocultures rely heavily on chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and mechanized farming, often degrading soil fertility, reducing microbial diversity, and producing nutrient-poor grain that diminishes the health potential of the bread itself. Stone milling was another critical factor, as it preserved the bran, germ, and endosperm, maintaining fiber, vitamins, minerals, and healthy fats, and even retaining trace microbial life that contributed to natural fermentation, in stark contrast to industrial roller milling that produces white flour stripped of nutrients, fiber, and biological complexity, leaving bread that is convenient but nutritionally inert. Fermentation and baking practices reinforced ecological and cultural values because slow, natural sourdough fermentation relied on local wild yeasts and lactic acid bacteria, enhancing flavor, digestibility, nutrient bioavailability, and gut health, while integrating microbial ecosystems unique to the region. Whereas rapid industrial yeast fermentation eliminates these processes, producing uniform, sterile loaves that lack both microbial richness and ecological identity. Bread also functioned as a vehicle for social cohesion and cultural transmission, as communal ovens, apprenticeship systems, and generational knowledge sharing fostered relationships, reinforced rituals, and embedded moral and ethical values into daily life, connecting food preparation with identity, responsibility, and environmental stewardship. Whereas modern industrial bread isolates consumers from production, eroding cultural knowledge, mindfulness, and the social fabric around food. The ecological context of bread extended to the entire agricultural cycle, as medieval bakers and farmers worked with seasonal variations, soil health, and local biodiversity, integrating crop rotation, mixed plantings, and natural fertilizers to optimize sustainability. Whereas modern supply chains often transport wheat globally, prioritize shelf stability over nutrient density, and ignore local ecological impacts, thereby reducing the overall sustainability and environmental alignment of bread. Nutritional density was directly tied to these cultural and ecological practices. Whole grains provided complex carbohydrates, fiber, minerals, vitamins, and antioxidants. Slow fermentation, pre-digested gluten, synthesized B vitamins, and dense loaf structures optimized digestion, glycemic response, and satiety. Whereas industrial bread, stripped of fiber, fermented rapidly with commercial yeast, and baked for speed, offers minimal nutritional value, rapid glucose spikes, and limited digestibility. Even the act of consuming bread carried cultural and physiological importance, as dense loaves required deliberate chewing, engaging the senses, stimulating saliva and enzymes, and promoting mindfulness, while modern soft loaves encourage rapid, unconscious consumption, reducing both digestive efficiency and satisfaction, which can contribute to overeating and metabolic imbalance. The integration of bread with complementary foods further enhanced health, as medieval diets paired bread with fermented vegetables, broths, legumes, fats, and occasional proteins, creating synergistic nutrient absorption and stable blood sugar. While modern consumption often pairs refined white bread with processed spreads, sugars, and ultra-processed foods, compounding inflammation, digestive stress, and metabolic beyond nutrition, bread embodied aesthetics, ritual, and identity, as dense loaves carried flavors shaped by fermentation, microbial communities, and local grains, while being embedded in communal and religious traditions, which reinforced ecological awareness, gratitude, and respect for natural resources. Whereas modern industrial bread is engineered for softness, visual uniformity, and mass appeal, losing both sensory depth and cultural significance. Technical factors such as hydration, fermentation, duration, flour composition, oven type, and baking temperature all influenced enzyme activity, microbial survival, nutrient preservation, and digestibility in traditional bread making, demonstrating an advanced systemic understanding of food biology. While industrial processes prioritize speed, consistency, and cost efficiency at the expense of these health-promoting factors, the cumulative effect of these cultural, ecological, and technical practices made medieval bread a holistic superfood that supported human physiology, gut health, micronutrient intake, metabolic stability, social cohesion, ecological stewardship, and sensory engagement. Whereas the decline of these practices in industrialized bread making illustrates how disconnection from environment, culture, and biological complexity contributes to nutrient, microbiologically inert, and culturally sterile foods, with profound consequences for health, community, and ecosystem resilience. Ultimately, the story of bread's cultural and ecological dimensions demonstrates that nutrition cannot be separated from the social, environmental, and technological context of production and consumption, and that reclaiming traditional practices including diverse grains, stone milling, slow fermentation, dense loaf structures, communal baking, ecological integration, and mindful consumption offers a path toward not only improved digestion, nutrient density, and metabolic health, but also revitalized cultural heritage, social bonds, and sustainable food systems, showing that the lessons embedded in historical bread-making remain vitally relevant for contemporary society seeking to harmonize human health with ecological and cultural integrity. The culmination of understanding bread through cultural and ecological lenses emphasizes that medieval bread was not merely a source of sustenance, but a sophisticated expression of human ingenuity, environmental adaptation, and societal cohesion, because every stage from seed selection and cultivation to fermentation, baking, and consumption was interwoven with local ecology, seasonal cycles, and communal traditions, creating a food that was both biologically nourishing and socially meaningful. While modern industrial bread, in contrast, exemplifies the consequences of prioritizing efficiency, uniformity, and global distribution over health, biodiversity, and cultural integrity, beginning with the choice of grains. As medieval bakers and farmers cultivated diverse varieties such as spelt, rye, emmer, barley, and einkorn, each adapted to the microclimate and soil characteristics of specific regions, promoting not only nutrient density and flavor complexity, but also agricultural biodiversity, pest resistance, and soil health. Whereas contemporary industrial wheat relies on high-yield monocultures, chemical fertilizers, and pesticides, producing grain that is often depleted, fragile in flavor, and ecologically taxing. The milling process reinforced these distinctions because stone grinding preserved the germ, bran, and endosperm, maintained fiber, vitamins, minerals, and essential fatty acids, and even allowed native microbial communities to survive and participate in subsequent fermentation. Whereas roller milling in modern factories removes these components to produce white flour that is nutritionally empty and microbiologically inert, demonstrating how technological choices directly affect both human health and ecological integrity. Fermentation and baking practices further exemplified ecological wisdom and cultural sophistication, as traditional sourdough relied on local wild yeasts and lactic acid bacteria to pre-digest proteins, neutralize anti-nutrients, enrich B-vitamin, and cultivate probiotics that supported the gut microbiome, nutrient absorption, and immune function, while also producing flavor depth, extended shelf life, and sensory satisfaction. Whereas industrial bread relies on rapid commercial yeast fermentation, chemical additives, and high-speed ovens that eliminate microbial life, reduce nutritional complexity, and disconnect the bread from its ecological and cultural context. Bread also served as a vector of community and cultural identity, because medieval baking occurred in communal ovens, often accompanied by shared rituals, apprenticeships, and intergenerational knowledge transfer, fostering social cohesion, ethical values, and respect for natural cycles, whereas modern bread is largely anonymous, mass-produced, and consumed individually. Severing these social and cultural connections, the ecological integration of bread making extended to crop rotation, soil fertility management, mixed grain cultivation, seasonal harvesting, and local sourcing, ensuring that bread production worked in harmony with natural systems, whereas globalized supply chains prioritize volume, speed, and shelf life, often at the expense of soil health, biodiversity, and nutrient density. Traditional bread's nutritional and biological properties were inseparable from its cultural and ecological practices, as whole grains, long fermentation, dense loaf structure, and microbial diversity collectively enhanced fiber intake, glycemic stability, nutrient absorption, digestibility, and gut microbiome richness, while modern industrial bread, stripped of fiber, refined, rapidly fermented, and additive-laden, contributes to glucose spikes, metabolic stress, digestive challenges, and chronic inflammation. The act of eating bread in historical contexts further reinforced cultural, physiological, and sensory benefits because dense loaves required slow chewing, stimulated saliva and digestive enzymes, promoted satiety, and encouraged mindful consumption, while soft, pre-sliced industrial loaves promote rapid, mindless eating, reduced digestive efficiency, and overconsumption. Bread also synergized with other foods in the medieval diet, such as fermented vegetables, broths, legumes, natural fats, and occasional proteins, enhancing nutrient absorption, stabilizing blood sugar, and supporting long-term health. Whereas modern consumption patterns often pair processed white bread with refined sugars, industrial spreads, and ultra-processed foods, amplifying metabolic and inflammatory stress. Aesthetic, sensory, and ritualistic elements of bread, including crust, color, aroma, flavor, and communal sharing, were integral to both pleasure and health, reinforcing respect for the environment, seasonal cycles, and social networks. Whereas industrial bread prioritizes softness, uniformity, and marketability, reducing flavor, engagement, and cultural meaning. Technical variables such as hydration, fermentation, duration, flour composition, oven type, and baking temperature, carefully controlled in traditional bread making, optimized nutrient preservation, enzyme activity, microbial survival, and digestibility, while modern high-speed industrial processes sacrifice these health-promoting elements for efficiency. Collectively, medieval bread illustrates a holistic system in which nutrition, microbiology, ecology, social cohesion, and sensory engagement were seamlessly integrated. Whereas the decline in these practices with industrialization has resulted in bread that is nutrient poor, microbiologically dead, culturally sterile, and environmentally disconnected, with profound consequences for health, community, and planetary resilience. Reclaiming elements of traditional bread-making diverse grains, stone milling, slow fermentation, dense loaf structures, local sourcing, ecological integration, communal baking, and mindful consumption offers not only improved nutrition, digestibility, and microbiome health, but also the restoration of cultural heritage, social bonds, ecological stewardship, and sensory richness. demonstrating that the lessons embedded in historical bread making remain highly relevant for contemporary society seeking to harmonize human health, community well-being, and environmental sustainability, and highlighting that bread, when understood as a living, culturally, ecologically, and biologically integrated food, represents a model for reconnecting nutrition with meaning, ecology, and shared human experience, transforming a simple staple into a superfood that nourishes body, mind, microbiome, culture, and environment simultaneously. Reviving the superfood qualities of medieval bread in the modern world requires a comprehensive understanding of not only its nutritional and biological attributes, but also its cultural, ecological, and technical foundations. Because traditional bread was a living food whose power derived from the interplay of whole grains, natural fermentation, microbial diversity, dense structure, and integration with seasonal and local diets. And restoring these qualities begins with selecting the right grains, emphasizing ancient varieties like spelt, einkorn, emmer, rye, and barley, which are naturally rich in fiber, micronutrients, antioxidants, and flavor, and which, when grown in healthy soils with sustainable practices, retain high bioavailability of nutrients, whereas modern high-yield wheat often lacks these qualities, making the choice of seed foundational to recreating bread that truly nourishes the human body. The milling process is equally critical, because stone grinding preserves the bran, germ, and endosperm, maintaining essential vitamins, minerals, healthy fats, and fiber, while even retaining trace microbial communities that support natural fermentation, unlike roller-milled white flour, which is stripped of nutrients, leaving bread that is easy to digest but biologically empty. Fermentation practices form the heart of reviving superfood bread, as slow, natural sourdough fermentation allows wild yeasts and lactic acid bacteria to predigest gluten, neutralize antinutrients like phytic acid, produce B vitamins, create organic acids, and populate the dough with probiotics that improve gut microbiome diversity, nutrient absorption, digestive efficiency, immune function, and even mood, while rapid industrial yeast fermentation bypasses all these benefits, demonstrating that time and microbial life are integral to nutrition. Hydration, fermentation time, and temperature must be carefully controlled to balance enzymatic activity, microbial survival, dough texture, and nutrient availability, ensuring that the bread is both digestible and nutrient-dense, and that the final loaf has a dense structure that promotes slow digestion, stabilizes blood sugar, and enhances satiety, whereas modern airy loaves encourage rapid glucose spikes, overconsumption, and metabolic stress. Combining fermentation with complementary grains, seeds, and flours can further enhance nutrition, creating a diverse spectrum of amino acids, minerals, fibers, and antioxidants that interact much like medieval bakers' intuitively optimized grain blends, while modern homogenized flours lack these interactions. Baking practices also play a key role, as moderate, even heat in stone or brick ovens preserves antioxidants formed during the Maillard reaction, maintains microbial metabolites, enhances flavor, and forms a robust crust that slows digestion, whereas industrial high-speed ovens compromise nutrient retention, flavor complexity, and biological activity. The integration of bread into the diet must mirror historical practices, pairing loaves with fermented vegetables, broths, legumes, healthy fats, and occasionally proteins to create nutrient synergy, improve glycemic control, and support long-term health, while avoiding combinations with refined sugars, processed spreads, and ultra-processed foods, which undermine the benefits of traditional bread. Sensory and cultural aspects are also crucial, as engaging with bread through touch, smell, and taste encourages mindful eating, stimulates digestive enzymes, and enhances satisfaction, while fostering appreciation of the ecological, historical, and communal context of food, which was central to medieval baking traditions, but often lost in modern consumption. Reclaiming communal and ritualistic practices, such as sharing bread in small groups, baking in community ovens, or participating in multi-generational knowledge transfer, reconnects people with the social, ethical, and ecological dimensions of food, reinforcing sustainable habits, ecological stewardship, and cultural continuity, whereas industrial bread production isolates consumers and erodes these relationships. Reviving superfood bread also necessitates attention to sustainability, including local sourcing of grains, organic or regenerative farming practices, crop rotation, biodiversity, and ecological stewardship, ensuring that the food system that produces bread is aligned with the environment, restoring the interconnection between soil health, plant nutrition, microbial life, and human well-being, in contrast to modern globalized supply chains that prioritize yield, profit, and uniformity over ecological integrity. Finally, education and experimentation are vital, because understanding the science of grains, fermentation, microbial life, baking, nutrition, and ecology allows modern bakers and consumers to make informed choices, recreate traditional methods adapted to contemporary contexts, and optimize bread for both taste and health, demonstrating that historical wisdom and modern knowledge can converge to produce a food that nourishes the body, supports the microbiome, stabilizes metabolism, enhances immunity, engages the senses, fosters social connection, and promotes ecological sustainability, ultimately proving that the superfood qualities of medieval bread can be fully realized today by combining ancient techniques with attention to microbial life, respect for ecological systems, mindful consumption, and integration into balanced, nutrient-rich meals, transforming bread from a processed staple into a living, functional, and culturally resonant superfood capable of restoring human health, community bonds, and environmental alignment. Continuing the revival of medieval superfood bread, it is essential to understand that every aspect of traditional bread making, from grain cultivation to fermentation, baking, and consumption, is interconnected, creating a holistic system that supports human health, microbiome diversity, ecological balance, and cultural continuity. And modern bakers aiming to recreate these benefits must prioritize ancient grains such as spelt, einkorn, emmer, rye, and barley, grown in nutrient-rich soils with sustainable or regenerative agricultural practices that enhance mineral content, maintain healthy soil microbiota, and promote biodiversity, because the nutritional quality of the bread begins at the field level, and no amount of fermentation or baking can fully compensate for depleted modern wheat. Varieties grown in monocultures with synthetic inputs, stone milling is the next critical step, as it preserves the germ, bran, and endosperm, retaining essential fibers, vitamins, minerals, and beneficial fats, while also allowing residual microbial communities to participate in natural fermentation, whereas roller milling removes these elements, resulting in biologically empty white flour, emphasizing that the choice of milling method directly impacts both nutrient density and microbial potential. Fermentation is the heart of superfood, bread, and slow, natural sourdough processes using wild yeasts and lactic acid bacteria predigest gluten, neutralize phytic acid, synthesize B vitamins, produce organic acids, and create probiotics that populate the gut, enhancing digestion, nutrient absorption, immune function, and even mental well-being, whereas rapid commercial yeast fermentation skips these steps, producing loaves that are uniform but biologically inert. Control of hydration, temperature, and time during fermentation is crucial, because optimal conditions ensure microbial diversity, enzymatic activity, proper loaf structure, and nutrient preservation, while modern shortcuts compromise these benefits, creating bread that is easy to slice and transport but lacks the slow-release carbohydrates, fiber, and micronutrient synergy found in traditional loaves. Combining different grains and seeds during fermentation can further enhance amino acid profiles, fiber diversity, and antioxidant content, reflecting the medieval practice of blending grains to maximize nutrition and flavor complexity, which industrial white bread lacks due to homogenized flour and additives. Baking techniques also preserve the superfood qualities, as moderate, even heat in brick or stone ovens develops a robust crust, maintains microbial metabolites, retains antioxidants from the Maillard reaction, and produces flavors that stimulate appetite and mindful eating, whereas high-speed industrial ovens destroy many of these benefits, leaving bread nutritionally diminished and biologically lifeless. Mindful consumption is an equally important factor, because dense, slow-fermented loaves require chewing, which stimulates saliva and digestive enzymes, promotes satiety, enhances nutrient absorption, and engages the senses, whereas soft, pre-sliced industrial loaves encourage rapid, mindless consumption, undermining digestion and metabolic regulation. Integrating bread into nutrient-rich, seasonal meals reinforces its superfood potential, as pairing it with fermented vegetables, broths, legumes, healthy fats, and occasional proteins creates synergistic nutrient absorption, stabilizes blood sugar, and supports microbiome diversity. Whereas modern bread is often consumed with processed spreads, sugars, and ultra-processed foods, amplifying glycemic stress and chronic inflammation, the communal and ritualistic dimensions of traditional bread making are also key to its holistic benefits, because shared preparation, baking in community ovens, and generational knowledge transfer foster social cohesion, cultural continuity, and a deep appreciation for the interconnectedness of food, people, and environment, which industrial bread production largely eradicate. Sustainability is central, because sourcing grains locally, using organic or regenerative practices, and respecting seasonal and ecological rhythms ensures that bread supports environmental health, soil fertility, biodiversity, and long-term food security. Whereas globalized industrial systems prioritize speed, volume, and uniformity at the expense of ecological and nutritional integrity, modern bakers can experiment by combining historical techniques with scientific understanding, controlling fermentation, hydration, and baking conditions to maximize nutrients, microbial diversity, and flavor, while adapting to contemporary kitchen constraints, demonstrating that ancient wisdom and modern knowledge can coexist to produce loaves that are functional, delicious, and health-promoting. Education plays a vital role because understanding the interplay between grains, microbial life, fermentation, baking, nutrient synergy, ecology, and cultural context allows consumers and bakers to make informed choices, recreating traditional bread in ways that restore gut health, metabolic stability, micronutrient intake, immune resilience, sensory engagement, and cultural and ecological awareness. Ultimately, reviving medieval superfood bread requires a systems approach, encompassing ancient grains, stone milling, slow natural fermentation, dense loaf structure, microbial diversity, mindful consumption, ecological sourcing, sustainable farming, communal practices, and integration into balanced meals, demonstrating that bread can transcend being a mere staple to become a living food that nourishes body, mind, microbiome, culture, and environment simultaneously, and that the principles embedded in historical bread making remain profoundly relevant, offering a blueprint for transforming modern diets, restoring health, reinforcing cultural and social bonds, and aligning human consumption with ecological and biological integrity. The final part of reviving the superfood qualities of medieval bread emphasizes that true restoration involves integrating nutrition, microbiology, ecology, cultural awareness, and mindful consumption into a coherent system, because bread was historically more than sustenance. It was a living, functional food that nourished the body, supported the gut microbiome, stabilized metabolism, reinforced community bonds, and reflected ecological intelligence. And bringing these benefits into the modern era requires both understanding and deliberate action, beginning with the choice of grains, which must prioritize ancient and nutrient-dense varieties such as einkorn, emmer, rye, and barley, grown with sustainable or regenerative methods that promote soil fertility, biodiversity, and ecological resilience, as the foundation of bread's superfood properties is inseparable from the vitality of the grains themselves. Stone milling preserves the germ, bran, and endosperm, retaining fiber, essential fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, and trace microbial life that supports natural fermentation, while modern roller milling produces nutrient-depleted, biologically inert white flour, demonstrating the critical role of processing in determining the final health value of bread. Fermentation remains the cornerstone of revival because slow, natural sourdough processes allow wild yeasts and lactic acid bacteria to predigest gluten, neutralize antinutrients, produce B vitamins, generate organic acids, and create a live microbial ecosystem in the dough that enhances gut health, immune function, and digestion, whereas rapid industrial yeast fermentation bypasses all these benefits, producing loaves that are uniform but devoid of life. Precise control of hydration, temperature, and time during fermentation is essential to optimize enzymatic activity, microbial diversity, loaf structure, digestibility, and nutrient preservation, and adding diverse grains, seeds, and whole flours enhances amino acid profiles, fiber diversity, antioxidant content, and flavor complexity, reflecting medieval practices that valued both nutrition and taste. Baking methods are equally important, as moderate, even heat in stone or brick ovens maintains antioxidants formed during the Maillard reaction, preserves microbial metabolites, forms a firm crust to slow digestion, and produces complex flavors. While industrial high-speed ovens compromise nutrient density, texture, and biological activity, mindful consumption amplifies benefits. Because dense, slow-fermented loaves require chewing, stimulate saliva and digestive enzymes, promote satiety, and encourage sensory engagement, whereas soft, pre-sliced industrial bread fosters rapid, mindless eating that undermines digestion and metabolic balance. Integrating bread with seasonal nutrient-rich foods such as fermented vegetables, broths, legumes, healthy fats, and occasional proteins creates synergistic nutrient absorption, glycemic stability, and microbiome diversity. While pairing modern white bread with ultra-processed foods exacerbates inflammation, glucose spikes, and metabolic stress, the social and cultural dimensions of bread are vital to its holistic effects. Because communal baking, shared meals, intergenerational knowledge transfer, and ritualized preparation foster social cohesion, cultural continuity, and respect for ecological systems, which industrial bread production largely sustainability is central, as sourcing grains locally, growing them organically or regeneratively, rotating crops, supporting biodiversity, and respecting seasonal rhythms ensures that bread production aligns with ecological health, soil vitality, and long-term food security, contrasting sharply with industrial supply chains that prioritize yield, speed, and shelf life over nutrition and environmental integrity. Modern revival also requires experimentation and education, because understanding the interplay of grains, fermentation, microbial life, baking science, nutrition, ecology, and cultural context empowers bakers and consumers to recreate traditional bread in ways that optimize flavor, health, and sustainability, demonstrating that ancient wisdom and contemporary knowledge can combine to produce a functional, delicious, and ecologically aligned food. Attention to loaf density, fermentation, duration, grain blending, and microbial cultivation is essential, because these factors determine glycemic impact, digestibility, fiber content, nutrient availability, and gut microbiome diversity. And neglecting them results in bread that is visually appealing but biologically dead, reclaiming the cultural and ritual aspects of bread making, such as communal preparation, shared consumption, and mindfulness in eating, not only enhances enjoyment, but also reinforces connections to food, people, and environment, fostering a sense of stewardship, gratitude, and intentionality that industrial bread cannot provide. The revival process demonstrates that bread can transcend its modern identity as a processed commodity to become a living, culturally resonant, nutritionally dense, and biologically active superfood that simultaneously nourishes body, mind, microbiome, and environment, supporting immune function, metabolic health, digestive efficiency, mental well-being, social cohesion, ecological awareness, and sensory satisfaction. By integrating sustainable agriculture, stone milling, slow fermentation, dense loaf construction, microbial diversity, mindful consumption, seasonal meal pairing, communal practices, and ecological consciousness, modern societies can reclaim the full spectrum of benefits once provided by medieval bread, proving that historical principles remain relevant and achievable, offering a blueprint for transforming contemporary diets, restoring human health, revitalizing cultural and social bonds, and realigning food production with ecological and biological integrity. Ultimately, the revival of superfood bread exemplifies the profound interconnectedness of food, biology, culture, and environment, showing that through deliberate, informed, and holistic practices, bread can once again serve as a living food, a source of nourishment, a pillar of community, and a model of sustainable, health-promoting culinary tradition.